Hello, welcome to this conversation on alcohol and consent. My name is Craig Bidiman. I work for University Health Services, and this is one of our new videos in our ongoing series that is just on-demand videos for you to watch and learn about things for. This is also available in during the school year, during the semester, so that I can present this to classrooms as well. So before we get into the whole conversation, I just want to share a little bit about myself. I'm the health and wellness promotion specialist at UMass Boston. I've been a wellness educator for 7 years, and I'm in my 5th year at UMass Boston. I have a master's of education in higher education administration from UMass Amherst. I have 2 bachelors, one in English and one in education from Oregon State University. And I am a big nerd for anime, vinyl records, tattoos, CrossFit, running, cycling, all those sorts of things. That's like a big part of my life right there. Now, the following conversation is a lot to do with drinking, problem drinking, alcohol, consent, sex, a lot of things that might be triggering for some folks. So I just want you all to know that if you do need anything to follow up on this video, just email me at craig.bideman@umb.edu and we can chat. I'd love to help out. And I like to start out this conversation with a story about my own drinking. From college is when I started drinking. I actually didn't drink until my 21st birthday, which was rare among a lot of my friends. And so when it came time for me to start drinking, I just knew that I had a lot of people in my life who were partaking in those things, but it wasn't necessarily for me yet. So when it came time for me to start drinking, it actually aligned with a big breakup that happened a week before my 21st birthday. And when that happened, I just decided that I was going to go off the deep end. And I got really depressed and I got really anxious all the time. And my drinking started to get out of control almost immediately. It was a really big problem for me for a few years because I kind of just started drinking on my own by myself in my room, and it was really unhealthy, and I was not taking care of myself, and it was something that kind of took over a lot of aspects of my life. And when I decided to stop drinking, it was right around a time when I had a couple really close encounters with death uh, uh, because of my drinking. And so I kind of had a big wake up call of like, hey, stop doing this and get better. And so I did. And I 8 years later have been sober for 8 years. And I have a really great community out here in Boston that is purely based around sobriety and taking care of people who are trying to get sober and are trying to get clean from addiction. Um, I also have a very supportive partner who does not drink and does not partake, so it's very much a supportive environment to have. So when it comes to drinking, it's something that I've had a good amount of experience with, and something that I have a lot of understanding of why people would be motivated to drink heavily, develop problem drinking, and possibly um, blur lines when it comes to alcohol consumption and consent. I've done a lot of work researching these things throughout the last few years, and so I'd love to share some of what I found and what research is out there. Now, alcohol use. Here's a here's a study that we found from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health. 53.6% of full-time college students aged 18 to 22 drank alcohol in the last month. 34.8% engaged in binge drinking, which is 5 or more drinks on a single occasion for men and 4 or more on an occasion for women in the past month. 9.7% engaged in heavy alcohol use, so binge drinking on 5 or more days in the past month. These rates are much higher higher than folks than those for their non-college attending peers. So folks who are in college tend to be drinking a lot more than folks who are not in college. So here's some warning signs of alcoholism. We share these things so that you can either observe them in yourself or observe them in other people. And I'll share a little bit of what these kind of things can manifest like. Relationship issues with family, friends, and significant others. It definitely got in the way of a lot of my relationships with people, because I would just check out. And one of the things that I tried to do to cope with loss, or just like not being able to cope with certain friends groups, um, not inviting me out or not doing anything, I would just drink. It also cost me a couple of relationships during college. It can lead to financial issues. This is because folks who tend to develop alcoholism have a lot of issues with money, because they end up spending most of their money on drinking or things associated with drinking. Um, there's a lot of guilt or shame about drinking while under the influence. So kind of constantly talking through what they're experiencing and having a lot of guilt or shame associated with those situations while they're specifically drunk. It can be a big indicator of alcoholism. Needing alcohol to relax or feel better, making alcohol kind of like a medicine, is not a very healthy way to exist in the world. Something that I know that I did for a little while. And so it's something that I want to make sure that folks kind of recognize is not a very healthy thing for folks to experience. Having issues at work, such as tardiness, absenteeism, or decrease in productivity. Basically, if a lot of folks who develop alcoholism just don't show up, their drinking ends up being a problem because they are unable to actually do the work that they're supposed to be doing. And a lot of that ends up costing them jobs. Spending a lot of time on activities that involve drinking, so like partying, going out, being at bars, um, spending most of your time drinking and drinking alone, that can be a really big indicator of alcoholism. Being unable to control alcohol intake can definitely be a big sign of alcoholism, and is like a big telltale sign. I know that I had a hard time just even keeping track of how many drinks I had had in a certain night, because I would just get off the rails a little bit. Making excuses to drink is also a pretty big sign of alcoholism. Finding really any reason to drink is a big MO for folks with alcoholism. Continuing to drink even when legal or social or economic problems develop. So even if someone gets into some legal trouble, they'll just continue drinking, or even if it's costing them some social clout or friendships or relationships or whichever, or even if they're losing money, they'll still just continue trying to drink so that they can get through those situations. Giving up important social, professional, or recreational activities because of alcohol abuse. So it's basically succumbing to the alcoholism, and just kind of like giving up. So a lot of folks who develop alcoholism will find ways to just kind of give up on things that they once loved, which I can relate to a little bit during college as well. Having obsessive thoughts about drinking, this is a big part of what I kind of went through with my drinking. I would think a lot about when I was going to have my next drink, what I was going to be doing with it, who I was going to be drinking it with, if I was going to be drinking alone. I would just kind of constantly have thoughts about it. And then also, because I exercise so much, I would try to use that as a way to balance the drinking as well, so that I felt okay with all the drinking that I was doing, because I was also running a whole bunch or going to the gym a whole bunch. And lastly, lapses in memory are a big aspect of warning signs with alcoholism, much like with a lot of other types of drugs as well. It can lead to some bigger issues. Some dangers of alcohol use. Drinking by college students ages 18 to 24 contributes to an estimated 1,519 deaths each year. In addition, there are an estimated 696,000 assaults by a student who has been drinking, and 97,000 cases of sexual assault or date rape every single year. This is where I give a content warning. What I'm going to be getting into next has a lot to do with some pretty troubling um, pretty troubling information, pretty troubling conversation, and pretty troubling definitions of issues that exist in the world. And so, in sharing these things, I don't share them to trigger anyone specifically, but it's just information to have so that you can be able to spot things in the wild and spot things in your friends and spot things in your own relationships and see if these things are happening as well. Now, sexual assault is broadly defined as any physical sexual activity that is forced, coerced, or unwanted. 95% of on campus sexual assaults go unreported. The reporting process is a whole presentation in and of itself, but essentially, students are not required to report their sexual assaults unless they choose to do so. Reporting it would be to police for a proper investigation. So there's a lot of reasons why people don't report, and a lot of those have to do with fear of retaliation, it not going anywhere, or just genuine fear of the process being more triggering and harmful than the experience itself, which can happen. So the next thing we have here is 50% of sexual assaults are alcohol related. 55% happen at a party. 1 in 5 women are sexually assaulted while in college. 1 in 10 men are sexually assaulted while in college. So this doesn't just affect women, it affects men as well. And there's a statistics that's not on here is 1 in 3 trans individuals are sexually assaulted while in college as well. Now, here's how we differentiate a little bit between the different acts of harassment. Harassment is the severe or repeated use by one or more students of a written, verbal, or electronic expression, or a physical act or gesture or any combination thereof directed at another individual that has the effect of causing physical or emotional harm to the individual or damage to the individual's property. So it's harming someone physically or emotionally, or damaging something of their like their computer, like taking that, smashing it, destroying it, and causing them harm that way as well. Placing the individual in reasonable fear or emotional harm to the individual or damage to the individual's property. Placing the individual in reasonable harm, fear or harm to the individual or their property as well. So a lot of this has to do with just kind of repeated acts that are dangerous, that are very harmful and can stoke fear in other people. There's a lot of intimidation involved as well. Incapacitation is the physical and/or mental inability, whether temporary or permanent, of an individual to make rational, reasonable decisions or judgments regarding one's well-being or welfare. States of incapacitation include but are not limited to unconsciousness, sleep, and blackouts. Incapacitation may result from the voluntary or involuntary consumption of alcohol and/or other drugs. Where alcohol or other substances are involved, incapacitation is determined by how the substance impacts a person's decision-making capacity, awareness of consequences, and ability to make informed judgments. Exploitation is taking sexual advantage of another person without their consent. So this includes, without limitation, causing or attempting to cause the incapacitation of another person in order to gain sexual advantage over such other person, causing the prostitution of another person, recording, photographing, or transmitting identifiable images of private sexual activity and/or the intimate parts of another person, allowing third parties to observe private sexual acts, and engaging in voyeurism. So there's a lot to unpack there. This is one of those instances where there's a lot unknown and a lot of gray area out there as to what folks feel is safe and comfortable sharing with other people, and sometimes folks go too far. And exploitation is one of those situations where people go too far, and um, it may not be completely physical, like physical harm, but it can be humiliation. It can be um, um, a way to um, share that someone is being like revenge porn happens with exploitation. There's a lot of things that go into the politics of folks who engage in revenge porn. In some states, it is a law, or it is a crime. There's a law that disallows people to release revenge porn. So this is a really serious aspect of sexual assault, and this whole conversation around harassment. So just make sure that if someone is trying to share something with you that has to do with their private relationship or a former private relationship, make sure that you know who you can talk to report that to, because that's not okay behavior. Stalking is any course of conduct more than one act directed at a specific person, directly, indirectly, or through a third party or other means that places a person in reasonable fear for their safety or the safety of others. So stalking is not even just only personal now, it is 100% digital as well. Um, Digital stalking is something that I feel is somewhat normalized, but also has been decatastrophized to some degree, because I feel that there's like a joke about, oh yeah, I stalked this person once I met them so I could learn everything about them so that when I met them again, like we could have good conversations. Like that seems to be very innocent and very chill, but at the end of the day, it really is not. And it's something that needs to be taken seriously, because those sorts of behaviors can be very dangerous, and folks can actually feel completely and very, very much threatened if they catch someone trying to stalk them or consistently showing up in places where they are, where they're going to be, and um, tracking down every movement that that person makes. There are shows about it. There are movies about it. Stalking is one of those things that seems harmless, but it is very harmful, and restraining orders do get filed very consistently in these sorts of situations. A lot of stalking can happen at the end of relationships as well. Where one party who may feel like they were wronged ends up doing a lot of either online or in-person stalking, showing up in places where the other person might be, or just consistently checking their social medias so that they can be keeping tabs on the person that hurt them. Coercion. This is the use of an unreasonable amount of pressure to engage in sexual activity. Coercion does not begin when the initiator makes an initial sexual advance. Coercion begins when the initiator continues to pressure another through the use of psychological or emotional pressure, drugs, alcohol, threat, intimidation, or force to engage in sexual behavior. Coercion is not consent. It's one of those things where there seems to be a gray area about whether someone's going to actually sleep with you or not, is trying to wear them down so that they will feel like it's something that you are comfortable doing. And that's not necessarily how it works. And that's not how it works at all. Coercion is to be taken very seriously, because a lot of folks who engage in coercive acts are sometimes often not engaging in very honest acts. They're being very dishonest with their motivations and their behaviors. And so it's important to make sure that if you have a friend who's portraying some of these behaviors, to kind of talk to them, call them out, call them in, have those conversations with them to make sure that they're not potentially going to harm someone that they're just trying to have sex with. Coercion is not consent. I have to repeat this time and time again to people, because some folks just don't get it. 99 knows and one yes is still a no. If you have to wear someone down to have sex with them, they probably don't want to have sex with you. So just make sure that it is something that you're taking the message on, and making sure that you're not um, trying to just wear someone down so that they'll sleep with you. Consent is the permission to engage in communication and or specific mutually agreed upon sexual activity or not sexual activity, really anything. Consent is freely given, actively and knowingly using mutually understandable and unambiguous words or actions, or in plain language, to agree to do something at that same time in the same way with each other. This can be done in any number of ways. Some relationships develop their own little language, their own conversation pieces around consent and how they communicate with each other. So as long as those are mutually agreed upon, this is okay. Consent cannot be inferred, implied, or given by someone who is asleep, incapacitated, unconscious, or under duress by intimidation, threat, coercion, or force. So basically everything that we just covered, consent is generally not going to be covered in that situation. Incapacitation, unconsciousness, being intimidated, being harassed, being forced, being coerced, all of those things are not consent. And some sexual activities may begin with consent, and then if it turns into a threatening or intimidating or incapacitating situation, consent is not necessarily involved in that anymore. So consent can be revoked at any time. It is freely given. It is one of those things that needs to just be a good conversation, because consent is all about communication. So as long as people are talking things out and talking through what they're trying to do, what they're wanting to do, that communication can lead to a lot of success in relationships, and it can clear up a lot of that gray area as well. Diving into bystander intervention, this is just a very important piece of the puzzle. I do an entire other presentation on bystander intervention. This is just a nice little introduction into the conversation. So if you want to watch a video on bystander intervention, it is in the playlist to the right. So just make sure that you are checking those out as well. The 4 Ds of bystander intervention are direct, distract, delegate, and document. For direct, it is stepping in. It's going directly to the situation at hand and stepping in to perhaps break down a potentially hazardous interaction between two people, potentially between a man and a woman sexually, or two people having a fight at the train, or whichever. It's directly stepping in and taking care of it. For some folks, that's not a comfortable thing to do. So you might have to get other people involved, which is what delegate is. Get other people involved to either step in if someone feels comfortable doing that, have other people interrupt the space, make distractions, just get people away from the potentially hazardous situation, and then document using a phone, using pens, paper, whichever you need to do to preserve the moment so that you can document exactly what's happening, and make sure that you have those times, dates, who is there, what was there, where were you, what was happening. Document all of those things so you can have it down, and get multiple people to do that as well, so that you have multiple people, if you can, so that you have multiple people sharing their stories as well. Here are some contacts and resources that you can reach out to for the Dean of Students Office. They're on-campus spaces on the 4th floor of the campus center, but definitely use dean.students@umb.edu. You can reach me through craig.bidiman@umb.edu if you want to chat more about these things. And then that's really all I have. So thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry for all my coughing. I hope that didn't distract too much, but yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you will watch more. So thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon in another video, probably. Goodbye.